Is French hard to learn? Well, I speak 8 languages, including French, so I'm going to give you my brutally honest assessment from experience of just how hard French is to learn. And make sure you stay to the end when I'm going to give you 5 things that you've absolutely got to get right if you want to be successful at learning French. If you're new here, my name is Ollie Richards, and this channel is all about helping you learn a new language quickly using the power of story so you can become fluent faster and live your best life. Now, to begin, I want you to take a look at these French words. La boutique, l'empire, la cage, le fruit, l'image, le menu, la nature, le train, le yoga, l'alphabet. Do you recognize any of these? Maybe all of them, perhaps? These all mean exactly what they look like in English, and there are plenty more words like this. So let's start with the important point that some aspects of French are objectively very easy. In the case of these words, the main difference is just the pronunciation, which brings us to the first thing that French learners complain about, which is that French pronunciation is tricky. French has a lot of vowel sounds, many of which are new for English speakers. There's the famous French R, a tricky one to master. And in spoken French, especially if it's fast, words can sound quite different from the standard written pronunciation. For example, je ne sais pas becomes je sais pas, or qu'est-ce qu'il fait becomes qu'est-ce qu'il fait. Things change. And it's true that one of the main challenges with French is just getting used to how it sounds, both in terms of pronouncing it yourself or understanding people when they're speaking fast. And these words do tend to blend together. So no sugarcoating here, but like a lot of hard things, the scariest time is actually right at the beginning when you don't know anything. Once you get used to it, it ain't that bad. So the second common complaint is that French verb conjugations are difficult. But how hard are they really? Well, in English, our regular verb conjugations are very limited. So for example, in the verb to eat, I eat, you eat, he or she eats, we eat, they eat. It doesn't change much, right? But in French, verbs conjugate a little bit more, which means that the endings will change depending on who is talking. I, you, he, she, we. It looks a bit tricky, right? But the good news is that the difference between written French and spoken French is actually so big that the first, second, third, and last on this list here actually sound exactly the same. Je mange, tu manges, il mange, il mange. Even though you spell them all differently, it actually sounds the same. And it is the same for many other verbs in French as well. In spoken French, the conjugated verb is often pronounced the same, which means that on a kind of very practical level for learning French, it is a lot easier than it actually seems at first sight. Pretty cool, right? But let's see what the next worry about French is. It is irregular spelling. Does irregular spelling make French hard? Well, French is not a phonetic language, meaning you can't always tell the way a word is pronounced by the way it's written. But here's the thing, English is not a phonetic language either. There are plenty of words in English that you might forget exactly how to spell, but you just kind of brush it off and say, oh, I'm just terrible at spelling, you know. But you can still speak just fine, can't you? So spelling doesn't have to be a big deal in learning a language. So what's so hard about French spelling? Well, French has 3 categories of silent letters. First, there's the letters that come at the end of words. And the basic rule in French is that the final consonant, apart from a few exceptions, is not pronounced. So, for example, the word parler, meaning to speak, has a silent R at the end. And there are 2 other silent letters in French as well, which are E and H. So, for example, this word here, starting with H, héros, is pronounced just like that, héros, without the H at the beginning. And this word, la terminale, the E at the end is not pronounced like it might be, say, in Italian. But not all French E's are silent. There are 4 ways to pronounce the E, varying from the kind of E to the E. Kind of subtle. Look, when you've been learning French for a while, you start seeing the similarities in the written form and you get a feel for how certain words are pronounced. So you will really pick it up in no time. And there's also the rather important fact that if you do slightly mispronounce something, guess what? It really doesn't matter all that much. And it certainly doesn't matter anywhere near as much as most people think it does in the overall context of speaking a language. Now next there is French gender. Perhaps you already know that all French nouns have a gender, either masculine or feminine. And if you get the gender wrong, it can be a bit confusing. So for example, take the word for beautiful. In French, they use belle to describe feminine nouns and beau for masculine. So if you want to say the beautiful house, then you have to say la belle maison, because la maison is feminine, so you need belle. But if you get the gender wrong and you think maison is masculine, then you'll say le beau maison, and it will sound extremely strange to a native speaker. So on the face of it, this is pretty hard, right? Because words change depending on whether it's masculine or feminine. Luckily, most adjectives are actually quite regular and easy to manipulate. With most of them, you just take the masculine form and add an E on the end to make it feminine. It's quite nice. So for example, américain becomes américaine. Blond becomes blonde. Fort, forte. Joli, jolie. Petit, petite. But anyway, once again, if you get the gender wrong here and there, people will still understand what you mean. So although it's important, it's simply not this life or death thing that warrants getting too worked up about. So we've looked at 4 tricky areas of French. It's pronunciation, verbs, spelling, and gender. Now here's the big question. What is the best way to learn French? Well, it depends on a few things, like your motivation, the materials you like to use, the languages you already speak, how many hours you've actually got to devote to studying the language each week. Now, I actually have a very unique method that I recommend, and it's called the story learning method. This is what I teach. It's a very fun, natural, and effective way to learn French through stories. And if you'd like to learn how that works, you can watch it here in this video, and I'll put a link in the description as well. But you don't have to use a story learning method, whichever method you use. Here are some principles that will help you ride out the tricky areas from this video if these are what you're worried about. So first of all, make sure you're actually motivated to learn. And this sounds very, very silly, but it helps to have an actual list of reasons that you want to learn French. Imagine yourself speaking French and become obsessed with this new challenge. You've got to want it, because if you don't want it, then as soon as the going gets tough, you'll throw in the towel. So make sure it's something you really want to do. Second, make a serious game plan. Figure out what you want to do in advance. Set some goals that you can easily accomplish within a few months or a few weeks that are meaningful for you. So you might want to learn to introduce yourself, or learn the 100 most useful words in French, for example, or read a complete short story in French, which is my kind of goal. Whatever it is, little things like this actually help you sense the progress you're making. Whatever motivates you, make that into a little mini goal. And then once you've got these goals and you've got the motivation, the third thing is, don't just think about studying, you've got to actually study. So the bottom line here is that whatever method you choose to use, however you like to learn, you've actually got to make a start and actually study every day. And again, this sounds so simple, but it always amazes me how many people kind of talk about learning, think about learning, watch YouTube videos like this about learning, but never actually sit down and begin to learn. So put together a plan, figure out how and when you're going to study, and actually sit down and do it. I know it sounds simple, but consistency can solve any language problem you can think of. And all the things we've looked at in this video, you will solve these so easily if you just turn up every day and put the time into studying. Right? Number 4 is to speak French way, way, way sooner than you think you can. Now, you don't have to start speaking at the beginning. In fact, I often recommend you don't start speaking with people right at the beginning. It's better to learn something first. But ultimately, for most people, speaking is the goal, and speaking is a very important part of the process. A lot of people have this idea that first you study, first you learn the language, and then you start to speak. But you can learn the language through speaking, and if you put it off for too long, then speaking with people becomes a big scary thing that you never overcome. Speaking French is exciting. It can motivate you. So find a conversation partner to practice with, hire a tutor to talk with once a week. It's not really important what you say or how you run those speaking sessions. It's more about actually just getting the words out of your mouth. So lots of languages can be hard, lots of languages can be easy. Really, thing is, here's the big secret. None of it really matters, because your motivation to learn the language is far more important than everything else. And even the hardest language in the world, you will learn if you're motivated. I've learned some really hard languages, and I've been able to do it because I'm actually motivated and interested in doing it. So don't worry about the hard parts of French. Focus on why you want to learn. And in this video over here, I tell you about a special method to learn French using stories. It is a lot more fun than what you're used to from school. And it's a way that you can learn French using your brain's natural learning system. And you'll be learning with stories, which is just really, really good all around. So click the video over here and check that out next.